Good morning, friends. Welcome back to the Southern Homestead. It is quite early this morning, quite chilly, and still harvest season. Today I'm going to be harvesting the last of my green beans, and then we'll get those plants pulled out of the ground. I'm also waiting on tomatoes to fully ripen, and hopefully that'll be another few weeks and then we'll be done with those. We're not going to have too much of a fall garden this year. I do have a few broccoli plants that I planted, and then we're going to plant our garlic later this month. These green beans have seen better days, that's for sure. But since I knew we were going to be doing our final harvest, I didn't bother with any of the organic sprays or anything like that. And they're paying the price. We've got plenty of bug damage on the leaves. But the green beans look just fine. I have several bags of green beans already in the freezer, and when I get done with today's harvest, I'm going to go ahead and pressure can all of them to get them shelf stable, and then we'll have green beans all throughout the winter. We're actually down to our last jar of green beans that I pressure canned last year, so just in the nick of time. It's only 50 degrees out here, but with the morning dew on the plants, my hands are frozen. But I'm going to keep going.
Making our way how God intended. Life on the homestead recommended. When the going gets tough and you're done pretending. Life on the homestead recommended. There are no more 9 to 5 when you're living between the pines. No more struggling to get by.
One of the advantages of having a long growing season down here in the South, we can get a second crop of vegetables into the garden and have another bountiful harvest before the frost sets in. One of the downsides to having a long growing season is you have another harvest. By this time of year, you're getting tired and you're just so over the garden. Prime example, most of my garden right now looks like a bomb hit it. Michael has already started tilling up the garden area where the row crops were, and I've got pepper plants. After I harvest them, we're going to be done. We're going to pull those out of the ground. My asparagus fronds are still soaking up sunlight to develop that strong root system for next year's growth. But as soon as they start to wilt and die, then I'm going to cut those down to the ground and prepare that bed. So even though a lot of people are winding down the season, we're still going strong with our vegetables. Now, if I wanted to, I could probably have let these plants go another round. As you can see, there's still blooms on the plants, so I would have gotten more green beans. But again, I'm kind of over it at this point. Well, that's going to do it for the green beans this year. Now all we have to do is get them preserved for the pantry shelf. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse off the green beans, get them cleaned, and then I'm going to get them prepped by snipping the ends, and the bigger ones I'll probably cut in half. And then they'll be ready to go into the jars for canning. Along with the fresh green beans from today's harvest, I also have several bags that I picked this summer that have been in the freezer just waiting for today. Anytime you pull green beans out of the freezer and then decide to pressure can them, they're going to be somewhat soft and a little mushy. For the most part, we're going to be using them in soups and stews. I'll take the fresh green beans and I'll pressure can those, and they'll be a bit crisper, not as mushy, and we can use them for side dishes. Also, since I have my pressure canner out today, I'm gonna go ahead and make some more chicken broth. I'm down to my last quart of chicken broth. When it's soup and stew season, you gotta have broth. Going into my pot for my broth, I've got some chicken backs from when we processed our chickens this summer. And then along with that, I'm gonna go ahead and use my scraps that I save. I save them in Ziploc bags in the freezer, and when I get about 2 gallons full of scraps, it's time to make broth. Now, I'm a little early this time because I only have 1.5 gallons, but I'm in dire need of some broth on the shelves. So I'm just gonna go with it, and it'll be just fine. And that's it. I'm gonna put a lid on it and it's gonna cook for several hours. If you wanna see a complete video on how I do my homemade chicken broth, I'll make sure and put a link right up here for you. I'm about ready to start filling my jars with the green beans. My jars have been sanitizing, heating up in the dishwasher. So I'm gonna pull those out and I'm gonna go ahead and start loading the jars. I've got my canner behind me here on the stove and the water's heating up inside there. And I also have my kettle on the stove to heat up some water. Now you can use chicken broth in your canning of your green beans, but I'm not going to do that because, as I said earlier, I'm running low on my chicken broth and I'm actually in the process of making more. So boiling water is going to be just fine, and I'll add about a teaspoon of salt to each pint jar. Now I'm going to go ahead and load the first batch into the canner. Now, because my canner is large, I can add a second level of jars. I just put the last jar into the canner. I think I have 14 or 15 in there, and I have so many green beans, I'm gonna have to do a second batch. This is gonna process for 25 minutes at 10 pounds pressure. The good news is I have so many green beans this year that will line the pantry shelves. Next year, I shouldn't have to plant any green beans. It's just the two of us here at home, and I can't imagine that we'll go through all of these pint-sized jars of green beans this coming year. So we'll have enough to last us for 2. All of my green beans are finished processing, and I ended up with 21 pint jars of green beans. I think it's safe to say we won't need green beans planted in the garden for at least a couple of years. Before it gets too late this evening, I'm gonna go ahead and jar up my chicken broth and get that into the canner as well. Well, good morning. My chicken broth finally came out of the canner last night, and I ended up with 7 quart-sized jars of homemade chicken broth. All of those veggie scraps that were left over from making the broth are not going to go to waste. So they started out as scraps, we ended up with broth, and then we're going to use the scraps again to make another product. Stick around, I'll show you. I've already sifted through all of my scraps and made sure I pulled out all of the chicken bones. Had I cooked my broth like I normally do, up to 48 hours, the bones would have essentially disintegrated and I could just not worry about it and just leave them in. But since I rushed my broth, I'm gonna go ahead and remove those bones before I go to my next step. I'm gonna take my Ninja blender and I'm gonna start cycling through a lot of the scraps along with a little bit of the broth that I had reserved and blend it all together. Once I get everything blended, I'm gonna pour it into my Harvest Right freeze dryer trays. And then into the freeze dryer it goes. Any guesses as to what I'm making? If you know what I'm making, put a comment down below and we'll see if you're right. I'm gonna go ahead and keep cycling through all of these leftover scraps and get all of my trays lined. I'm gonna go ahead and pre-freeze them for 24 hours first before they go into the freeze dryer. I have all of my trays loaded and they're ready to go in the freezer. I'm gonna freeze them for 24 hours and then put them into the freeze dryer. My scraps from my homemade chicken broth have finally come out of the freeze dryer. It took about a day and a half to complete the process, and now I'm ready to move on to my final step. For the next step, I'm gonna go ahead and place it into my Ninja blender, grind it into a fine powder, and then I'll be ready to put it into jars. So if you guessed homemade chicken bouillon, you're correct. I ended up with not 1, but 2 full quart-sized jars of homemade chicken bouillon. Now you may be thinking, why not just buy it? Well, a couple of reasons. Many years ago, I became an ingredient list follower. What that means is I don't care what it says on the front of the package, I always turn it over and read the ingredients. And if you've ever seen the ingredients for chicken bouillon, you'll understand why I made my own. I'm gonna go ahead and throw those up on the screen here for you so you can see. If you look at the ingredient list, you would think for chicken broth, one of the first ingredients would be chicken. You're wrong. Instead, we have salt and maltodextrin, which is a polysaccharide, which is one of the worst things that you can ingest. There's also seed oils throughout and natural flavors, which is not regulated, by the way. So natural flavors is anything but natural and usually contains hundreds of different chemicals. If you'll scroll down the ingredient list of this chicken bouillon that you'll find in the grocery store, the amount of chicken is less than 2% of the product, which I think is just unacceptable. So that's one of the main reasons that I decided to make my own. The second reason I make my own is because here on the homestead, we try not to waste anything. And since I was making chicken broth already with scraps, why not save the scraps of the scraps and make another product? And it just turned out great. I think I have enough chicken broth to last me about a year or two on the pantry shelf. Well, that's 2 more jars of homemade product for my pantry shelf. Looks like we're gonna be well stocked for the next year or so. Thanks for hanging out with me on the Homestead, friends, and we'll see you next time.